Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at a traveler licensee from the early days, FASA. FASA would go on to publish Battletech, and from 84 to about 2001, they were the producers of Battletech and put out a ton of stuff for that too. But today we're going to take a look at their work as a traveler licensee at the very beginning of their existence. So we're going to take a look at some of their outstanding supplements and not one, but two fanzines. Not fanzines, but two magazines they put out during that time. Going a little bit of the history, talk a little bit again about who the Keith brothers. You cannot do a traveler video from the early days without talking about the Keith brothers. So we will, and that's not a negative, by the way. That's always a positive. I always love their contributions to Traveler. They were many and important. So today on page 121, we're going to take a look at the works of FASA from the early days of Traveler. Also, subscribers, as of the making of this video, getting that close to 2,000 subscribers. I can't believe the size of the channel. I appreciate the heck out of all the support, everybody who's subscribed. Thank you. Continues to grow. Let's keep it growing. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. Help me make that magic 2,000 number. Also, Patreon. I have active reward going for Patreon. If you want to become a patron on Patreon. That's hard to say. Take a look at it and see if there's anything there for you. So that's it. End of the commercial. Back to the important stuff at hand. FASA from the early days on page 121. FASA for Traveler. I already took a look at the big deck plans that FASA made for Traveler. I did that in a series of videos about a year ago. So I'm not going to really feature any of those in today's video. They are out there and they are gorgeous. They're ridiculously expensive to get, but they can be gotten on PDF through Far Future Enterprises and Drive-Thru-RPG, actually. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But basically what FASA was a Fredonian Aeronautical Space Administration, I believe, is what it originally stood for, and a little nod toward the Marx Brothers movie, Duck Soup. Fredonia is going to war. This is a fact we can't. That was a very popular thing in the early 80s. The Marx Brothers had been on a lot in the 70s, and they were a staple for New Year's Eve here in Chicago. And yet again, we have people from Chicago. If you watch my D&D videos, I talk about Chicago and Gary Gygax's connections. And here we have the Keith brothers, and FASA was based in Chicago, I think pretty much for their existence. The Keith brothers were from Oak Lawn, not too far from Pat's Hobbies, which was my main haunt early in D&D and Traveler. Got a lot of my Traveler stuff at Pat's. They lived about a mile from there. They lived not too far from my buddy Mike, who plays with us, and from where my wife grew up. My wife nor Mike ever knew them, but it's funny that they were all in the same neighborhood. But anyway, what they did is they published a bunch of licensed supplements for Traveler, approved for use with Traveler, the science fiction, adventure, and far future. And then Jordan Wiseman, no relation, not to be confused with Lauren Wiseman, which had a lot to do with Traveler also, and he worked for Game Designers Workshop. So basically, they started in 1981, and they went through about late 83, and they featured a lot of work by the Keith brothers, who lived in Oak Lawn, Illinois, but they had other developers on it as well. So Keith Sembaida, sorry if I butchered your name, I apologize. And then, of course, William H. Keith did the cover and some of the interior art. And this was during the time, too, the Keith brothers used to write and do art under pseudonyms, so it didn't look like the entire issue of something was done by them. Because, of course, in some cases, the entire issue was done by them. So here we get a nice look at Action Aboard Adventures of the King Richard. And this was a luxury liner that's a hub of intrigue. The one thing I really liked about several of these supplements was they had these little fold-out deck plans. Deck plans in the early 80s, not an early thing to come by, or an easy thing to come by early in the days. They were not easy to find. So anything like this, even though it's tiny and you really couldn't play on it, it still gave a great visual representation. Back in the day, we didn't have any real 3D terrain. We used figures. I have a lot of the original Traveler minis, and we would just draw it out on a piece of paper. So that was one of the nice features that they had in a couple of their supplements. And they had a wide range of supplements. I do not have everything that they did. A lot of these were purchased from my Royal Hobby Lucky purchase. And some of these I just bought off the shelf myself, but several of these came from Royal Hobby. So the ones I have are Action Aboard, the FCI Consumer Guide, which is equipment. Bunch of neat equipment. The nice thing about Traveler from the early days till now is that it's translatable. So you can go to an early Traveler thing, this one's over 40 years old, and you can pull the equipment out and just easily convert it to Mongoose or Traveler 5th or whatever you're playing. Ordeal by Eshar. Uh-oh. 1981 again. Here we go. You're dealing with the dreaded Zodani during the 5th Frontier War. Most of this takes place during the 5th Frontier War. So some nice primers in here for the 5th Frontier War, which of course is forthcoming from Mongoose in 2023. Rescue on Galatea. You're going to save someone. There's my Royal Hobby sticker right there. You're going to go rescue somebody on a hostile planet. You're a Gaiden of the 7 Pillars. This is a Keith Brothers adventure. I remember running this one. It's a desert environment. I remember running that particular adventure back a long, long time ago. It must have been my buddy's copy because I see my copy as part of my Royal Hobby find from about 89. I must have been using my original Traveler GM's material on that one, but I remember running this one. And then a double adventure. This Stocklets report, Staslek report, and the Herensa project. Neat little double adventure. And again, I think one of these is by the Keith brothers, J. Andrew Keith. And let's see, the other one is by Jim Cunningham. So kind of neat to get a double adventure. I always liked that about Traveler. In the Game Designers Workshop, you get a double adventure, $6. And then the Legends. The Skyraider trilogy, The Legend of the Skyraiders, The Trail of the Skyraiders, Fate of the Skyraiders. I mentioned this one in particular. First off, these are not the original copies that my buddy ran us in. I don't know what happened to his copies. I got all these at Royal Hobby in Rockford. I've told the story before. Driving in, up in Rockford, Illinois. Up there for a weekend with my wife. We're driving on the street. I saw Royal Hobby. Said, gotta stop. My wife said, oh gosh. She's a sport. She stayed in the car. I went inside and found out they were closing out all their Traveler stuff. About $30 later, I walked out of there with a cash and carry bag full of Traveler goodies that I still appreciate. I've told the story many times in the channel, but that's just for anybody who might not have known about it. Royal Hobby is still there. So if you're in the area, look them up. But anyway, The Legend of the Skyraiders, The Trail of the Skyraiders, and The Fate of the Skyraiders. Went through this as a player back in the early 80s. And who are the Skyraiders? Now, I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail on this in this video. I'm just going to show that this was originally a FASA publication. And all the FASA stuff went back to Far Future Enterprises copyright back in, I think, around 08 or 09. FASA itself closed its doors in 2001. Having ridden Battletech very high through the 90s with a cartoon show and Battletech combat centers. You could sit in a little computer pod and be in the combat. I went to those once. There was one here in Chicago. I went to it one time. It was a lot of fun. And video games and everything else. So FASA went on to good luck with Battletech, which again in the early days featured the Keith brothers. A lot of their work went from Traveler to Battletech. And then the final thing I'm going to talk about today is High Passage Magazine. This is issue 2 on top. And there's 3, 4, and 5. I don't have issue number 1, unfortunately. I've never been able to find it affordably. I found all these in the wild back over the years. A few of these I bought back when they were new. And then we went to Far Traveler Magazine, also by FASA. And we went, wait a minute. Well, Far Traveler explains in the editorial right here, the new magazine Far Traveler picks up where High Passage left off. Apparently for reasons I don't know, and I really don't care about, the folks who were making High Passage and the folks who were doing FASA came to a parting of the ways. I don't know what the issues were. Again, not really my business. I just know that High Passage ended Far Traveler picked up. This is Far Traveler issue number 1. Far Traveler went all the way to issue number 2. I don't have number 2, unfortunately. There, a little wraparound cover. These all had wraparound covers, which is kind of neat. I had kind of forgotten that until I was reviewing them for this video. This is one of my favorites. I like this one a lot. There you go. I like the orientation of the spaceship to them. Not everything would have to be upright. And then this one's not a wraparound cover, just cool front and back artwork. So the transition from High Passage to Far Traveler, kind of a big deal back then. Far Traveler, I think this was late 82 or early 83, October 82. And by 83, FASA was done pretty much as a Traveler licensee. I think there was 1 or 2 more objects or things published in 83, but then that was it for them. And like I said, don't cry for FASA. They went on to good fortune in Battletech in the 90s. So there are several other things. You can get these through Far Future Enterprises. They're under Apocrypha 1 for the Traveler books. I'll put a link below. You can get some of the deck plans and stuff for the FASA stuff through Drive-Thru RPG, but I really didn't see these adventures. All that being said, Legend of the Skyraiders, Trail of the Skyraiders, and Fate of the Skyraiders is going to be treated by Mongoose in 2023. It's one of the announcements from State of Mongoose that they put on their website. So I'm pretty excited about that. I did not reread all these in their entirety for this video. Since Mongoose is going to be doing their take on the Skyraider trilogy, I thought I would go over these 3, maybe in some detail, not to give spoilers for their story or anything, because I'm sure they're going to change their story, but just kind of a primer. I know I'm excited about the Skyraiders coming out from Mongoose, and I thought I'd take a look at the 3 books. These books are over 40 years old, so yeah, there will be spoilers, but I hardly feel that that's any kind of problem on 40-year-old material. So I'm going to be taking a look at all 3 of these in a future video, or possibly a couple of different videos. So that's it for today on page 121, just to take a look at the fun FASA offerings from the very early 80s and the origins of FASA. Thank you for watching. If you like what you heard and saw, please like and subscribe. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time on page 121.